The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey guys, I'm just waiting a few more minutes to see if we get a few more people. If you can hear me and you can see my screen, can you just type in the chat box that we're all good? Hey guys, can you hear me? Anybody out there? I can't hear you, so you need to type in the chat box if you can hear me. You're all on mute. All right, I'm going to assume that you can hear me. And we'll get going. Okay, so all right, let's get going here. Okay, so first of all, I'm Beth Shutt. I am the operations director for the Run Formula. So I do a lot of the coaching for Run Formula. And in addition, if you are part of QT2 at all, you or ORR or any of the brands of QT2 LLC, you've probably had some kind of interaction with me because I do a lot of other stuff for the company as well, some billing, some content management. I'm also a dietitian. I'm a registered dietitian, so I do core diet work. So yeah, so I'm kind of out and about and I do a little of everything. The thing that I primarily focus on though is the Run Formula. And so I'm going to do a course preview today on the Boston Marathon. I'm going to talk a little bit about the course, a little bit about what to expect on race day, a little bit about nutrition and how it's a tad bit different for Boston, being what Boston is. I am and you know, some of you on this webinar, listening to this webinar, have probably run Boston. You know the course, so this might just be a good reminder for you. Whereas some of you might be new to the race, and you might pick up some good stuff. So let's get rolling. Okay. So first, let's talk a little bit about the number of racers we got going here for the Boston Marathon. As you can see, last year was a bit of a down year. If anybody raced last year, you know why. It was pouring down rain, gale force winds in the 30s, pretty much as miserable as possible. So finishers down a little last year. I think last year was the highest DNF rate of all Boston. So definitely a tough year last year, but in general, roughly, you know, in that 25 to 27,000 range of people running and finishing. This is by no means the largest marathon in the world, but it is one of the largest. I ran New York City this past November, and it was the first time I ran the race, and I was absolutely amazed at the number of people that were run New York City. It's about double, even a little bit more than double of what Boston is. So definitely bigger races, but suffice it to say 27,000 people running on the same course on the very narrow, sometimes narrow roads of Boston. As most of you know, the only about 2 or 3 miles of the Boston Marathon course is actually in Boston. It starts 26 miles out of town in a little town called Hopkinton, and that is a really small town, and the start is extremely narrow where it starts. The roads are narrow. There's not a lot of, you know, room for 27,000 people. So why am I kind of harping on this a little? You just need to be prepared to be running with people every step of the way. Obviously, depending on where you are in the race, if you're running 250, it's going to be less dense up where you are. If you're running 4 hours, it's going to be more dense. If you're in one of the charity sections, it's definitely going to be very dense. But just be prepared for that. Aid stations may be crowded. Don't get frustrated and don't give up on fluids, fuels. Most of all, do not waste energy trying to weave in and out of people. That's a big mistake that I see at a lot of the big races. If you're one of my athletes, you will hear over and over again about how I don't want to see any weaving in and out. I want to see as close to 26.2 miles on the Garmin as possible. I don't want to see 27. I've seen over 27 miles run in marathons because people are doing a lot of weaving. It just wastes energy. It doesn't get you anywhere any faster. You just kind of have to accept at these bigger races, which I know many of you have done, but just, just as a reminder, and if you've never run a big race, just remember, it's going to be a little frustrating at times. Here is a picture of, as you can see in this picture, that's mile 25 there. So it didn't spread out a whole lot for this group. Just tons of people, as based on the numbers that these people are wearing in the picture. That's like charity. That's really high numbers, or like charity slot numbers, which just means that it's again, that's a very dense packing of people in that range. So, but that's kind of what you need to expect, and just kind of mentally wrap your mind around. So that's that. So let's talk a little bit about the course itself. Straight shot. Start in Hopkinton, finish downtown on Boylston. The towns up through the start are small and definitely, narrower roads. As you get closer and closer to town, things start opening up and spreading out a little bit. In terms of the course itself and the terrain, many kind of know Boston as being a tough course. The course itself is extremely fair, but there's a couple components of it that can make it tough if you don't execute properly. One of these components is the fact that as you can see from the little elevation, I don't know how well you can see this, but the first 4.5, almost 5 miles are quite down. So what ends up happening there is people go out way too fast because it's the excitement of the Boston Marathon, and you're going downhill, and most people, let's face it, most people start off a little too fast anyway in marathons. So that is a big trap at the Boston Marathon. And then you'll run flat, just kind of rollers, up until, past halfway, you'll actually go down another big hill around 16. And then what happens, after you've beat your quads up quite a bit, you get into the Newton Hills in 17, 18, 19, up to 20 and a half, 21. So the Newton Hills themselves are nothing. If you would run them on any given day, you wouldn't be, if you were just in the middle of a 5-mile run, for example, you wouldn't be very impressed by the Newton Hills. But where they come in the race so late, and also because, again, a lot of people go out too fast in marathons and don't pace properly. This is especially true in Boston with all the down to start. And the excitement of the race itself. So the Newton Hills kind of beat you up there through 17 through 20, 21, and then there is mostly down and flat to the finish. So the finish can be very fast. So that's just a little overview. A few more points. It's a straight shot. There's not many turns compared to many marathons. I don't know if any of you have run, like Chicago has a lot of turns. That kind of stuff makes races slower. The good news about Boston is it really is a pretty straight shot. Until you get downtown, there's really not many turns. So that's the nice part about it. About 38 feet of elevation gain per mile. But again, much of that elevation comes in that 16 to 20 mile range, the Newton Hills. So because it comes at the later stages of the race, and it kind of is a lot of it is clumped all together, that's what makes this course tough, or known as a tough or slow course. And again, a lot of the first part of the course is down, so be wary there. This course can be fast. But it's, again, notoriously tough because people, and yes, I'm looking at all of you, go out too fast on the hills, like I said, on the downhills, like I said, beat up their quads, and then the Newton Hills become the Newton Mountains. So when we talk about pacing, I'll talk a little bit about how to handle the terrain and the elevation to make it a fast course for you, but just know that that is the big trap of the Boston Marathon. Here again is the course elevation. As you can see, down, 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 down. And it's not all down through 5 miles. I mean, there's little bumps up and then down again, but the first mile is really down. And then it kind of flattens out and it's little bumps here and there. You go down another big hill to 16, and then that's when the Newton Hills, there's 4 of them. Heartbreak is the last one. The infamous Heartbreak Hill is right here. And then you go down again to the finish and flat. So, all right. So pacing and race execution are of utmost importance in Boston. One could argue that pacing and race execution are of utmost importance in any marathon, but it's especially true of Boston because Boston isn't one of those like a Chicago or a London or a Berlin or something where you can pretty much dial into one pace and just steady run the same pace the whole way. It's just not going to happen in Boston. So let's talk a little bit about pacing. First, it's important to understand what your, goal pace should be. And that's dictated not by, I think I want to run a 2:55, therefore that's my goal pace. Really, goal pace should be based off your training. And if you're, any QT2, run formula, outrival racing athlete, you're going to have a pacing plan from your coach to kind of tell you, okay, this is what I think you can run on relatively good conditions. So this is how we're going to do this. Let me just talk a little bit about the run calculator on the Run Formula website, because this can help you. This run calculator can help you kind of determine, again, what is that as based on your training inputs and your training data, what should that goal pace be? So let's talk a little bit about how to use this calculator. Obviously, custom distance is 26.2 miles. Like I said, there are 38 feet per mile of ascent, elevation gain. In here, what you'd put is run training mileage. So basically you want not just the biggest mile or the biggest week of miles you've ever run. You want the average of your 6 biggest weeks within 10 weeks of the race. So you're not counting like, oh, last year I ran a 50-mile week. We'll count that. No, you're counting in the training cycle leading up to Boston. What are your 6 biggest weeks? Average those together. So let's just say that's 45. If you ride a lot, we can count some of those miles, but let's just say you're a pure runner, so you're not riding at all. Years of experience is not total years of running, but years of experience training at this level. So for instance, I've been a runner for close to 30 years, but I didn't run, 45-mile weeks all those 30 years. So let's just, in our fake person here, let's just say they have 2 years of experience at this training level. So the 5K run time then, this is the piece that we manipulate a little bit. You'll have an idea of what you could run a 5K in. But so let's just say for this person, it's 21 minutes. And then you hit calculate. So what we're going to do first is look at what the training outputs are. So we put in 21 minutes. Look at these race distances. Sometimes people have run some races leading up to the marathon in the training cycle. So let's say you actually did run a 10K and you ran around 45 minutes, or you ran a half marathon leading into the race into Boston and you ran a 140, then this looks about right. We're on track. But go down here and check out in zone 1, zone 2, and again, these are the heart rate zones that we at QT2 Run Formula Outrival use. If you're not one of our athletes, the zone 1 would be, your aerobic pace. Zone 2 would be tempo pace. Just kind of take a look at these and see, is this lining up properly? Is my zone 1, like in the middle of my zone 1 when I'm running, is my pace for my long runs around somewhere between 8:30 and 9 minutes? So is it around 8:45? Is my zone 2 pace like in that 8:30, 8:15 range? If all of this is lining up, then you can look here and a run calculator says you're going to run about 3:33 as based on, again, the inputs, how much mileage you've run, about where you are fitness-wise, the amount of climbing that's in the race itself, how much experience you have. Those are all the factors that factor into what is that goal time. If you looked at those times and you're like, you know what, my Z1 pace is actually faster than that. I actually ran like a 1:35 half marathon leading into it. Then play with this 5K number a little until you go back and you see, okay, yeah, 1:38, yeah, that's better. That changes the Z1 paces. Just play around with that number until you get the proper output. That will then give you an appropriate, as based on your training, goal for the race. Okay, so that was a big description of the run calculator. Let's go back here now and see, now that we know, okay, my goal, appropriate goal is 3:30. I think I can run 3:30 at Boston. Now we're going to look at, okay, how are we actually going to execute this? So I really like this Find My Marathon.com, this pace band situation here. I really like this website because it helps you to see for various races, as based on the terrain, what your paces are going to look like. Okay, so what you do, I've already brought up the website for Boston. There's hundreds of different marathons in this database. So if you're running something else, you can use this for really a lot of the different marathons out there. But I've already brought it up for Boston. What you do is you're going to type in your goal time. We figured out 3:30 is an appropriate goal. So we're going to go down here. We're going to go to 3:30. Now, over here, it's starting to create a pace band for you. And that's based on a start strategy of evenly paced start and a pacing strategy of even effort. Not even pace. Even pace would be run 8-minute miles the entire way. But remember, I told you that's tough to do in Boston because of the elevation changes and things like that. What I highly, highly recommend for this race is to do either a conservative start or a very conservative start and match that with a negative split. Negative split, if you're one of my athletes, again, you've heard this so many times, negative split is how you run your best marathon. For an open marathon. I'm not talking about Ironman marathon, but how you run your best open marathon times. And all the world records are negatively split at the marathon distance or close to it. So I definitely put in negative split here and then choose either conservative start or very conservative start. And what that does over here is it creates the pace band and it shows you, okay, for the first mile, I want to be around 8, second mile, 8:05. So look, we're starting off actually a little slower than goal pace for the downhill miles. Now, this is absolutely opposite of what most people do, but trust me when I say this is how you run Boston and this is how you run well in Boston. So you'll run a couple miles slower than goal pace through the start, and that's again a conservative start. If you choose very conservative start, it slows you down even more through the first miles. And then what will happen is it'll start to pick up the pace as you see through halfway. You'll see here, mile 17 is in 18, and even a little bit in 19 and 20, 21. These are the Newton Hills. So this is why you'll see some slower miles through here. But then it has you finishing strong, basically, which is exactly how I would pace a marathon. So again, once you have a good goal time in mind, play around with this, kind of get a good idea of, what the miles will look like throughout. Okay. And just an FYI, there are no pace groups in Boston. I don't, I don't inherently trust pace groups, but that's not even an option in Boston, which for a lot of the bigger races it is. So, but Boston just doesn't play that game. So, okay. So that's pacing. Now, I just did this whole big, lecture on pacing and pacing appropriately and finding a good goal time, and then, then negative splitting and all that. But one thing that Boston does, one trick it plays is there's some pretty schizophrenic weather situations that we have going on in Boston. So if any of you are from this area, April in New England could mean 80 degrees. It could mean 30 and pouring down rain like last year. These are some of my favorite pictures of some of our Run Formula athletes. This is from last year, obviously. Tim here has raincoat upon raincoat. Maureen, this is one of my favorites of all time. She actually wore for the entire race dish gloves because her hands were so frozen last year. Again, it poured down rain. It was in the 30s. The wind was, I can't even explain it. The wind was brutal last year. And it's a point-to-point course, as you saw. So if the wind is a headwind, you're going to be fighting it pretty much the entire way. And then there are years, this was a relatively good year. This was 2 years ago, I think. It was one of the better years. It was in the 60s throughout the race, so very fair. There have been years where it's been in the 80s. So it can definitely be very hot. Basically, what I'm trying to say is the weather is all over the place. So when I was talking about pacing, picking appropriate goal time, and then negative split and things like that, that's for a relatively good condition year. And let's face it, that doesn't often happen in Boston. So that's kind of one of the tough things about this race as well. You get some doozies when it comes to weather. Obviously, if you're going to have gale force winds or you're going to have 80 degrees, you're going to have to adjust those goal times and the pacing appropriately. So just another thing to keep in mind when it comes to the Boston Marathon. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the aid stations. Gatorade Endurance and water at 25 different aid stations. So at just about every mile, you can get Gatorade Endurance, which is a very good sports drink for you, water. They have Cliff gels, but they're only at 11.8, 17, and 21 and a half. You are going to need gels or blocks or chews or whatever you're having way before that. So that means you need to carry your own, don't rely on the course for your gels, your calories other than your sports drink. So just a word to the wise there. Okay, let's talk a bit about the logistics of the Boston Marathon. It is a late race start, but a very early start to the day. So point-to-point course, you have to get your body out to Hopkinton. And then, as you can see here, this athlete, they call it the athlete village. You kind of just hang out there for hours. You get out there, you wake up really early and you get out, you're either bussed out there, you can be dropped off out there. There's multiple different ways to get out there. But then once you're out there, you kind of hang out for a long time. And then you kind of grow anxious and you get bored and you get annoyed at the fact that you're sitting there and you just want to run this race. Basically, the race, I think 9:50 is the earliest start. Some of the charity waves, some of the later waves start 11:30, 11:45. So we're talking about a lunchtime marathon, not necessarily the early morning marathons like most other marathons. So yeah. So to that end, a couple words about nutrition. Extra breakfast calories versus regular marathons. So because I'm a dietitian, this is one of the first things I think about. Okay, what are we going to do nutrition-wise to overcome the fact that we're running at lunchtime? So in our fueling plans, we recommend for the core diet, we recommend before a breakfast before a marathon, 2.5 to 3 hours before the race. I would still recommend that. However, that might be, depending on your start time, that might be 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And because of that, and you're probably been up since 5 a.m. to catch your bus and get out to the athlete village, I also recommend athletes to have something when they first get up in the morning, be it very simple. It could be a banana, half a plain bagel, a granola bar, just something extra. In addition to that, bring your race morning breakfast with you, have it 3 hours before, but also at the athlete village, have extra sports drink, have an extra banana, have extra gels, have extra chews, have an extra half of a bagel, just in case if you're out there and you're starting to feel like you need a little something as well. So take extra food with you, extra calories. And this isn't just your standard morning, normal breakfast kind of marathon. You need to have some extra calories on marathon race day because of the time. Also, take out to athlete village lots of extra clothes up to the start line to keep warm. If it's an 80-degree day, you probably won't need that. But just take more than you think you need out to athlete village, because again, you're out there. You're sitting around out in the open, unless if you're one of the special VIPs, you just sitting outside. You don't get a special tent or anything like that. So bring a plastic bag to sit on so you're not, so you don't get wet. You're not sitting on wet grass. And again, just be mentally prepared to get bored, anxious, annoyed. You don't want to start the race like that. So just prepare yourself that you're going to be sitting there for a while and just, come to peace with it early on. I did the New York City. Again, I did it in last fall. It's extremely similar. You get bussed out. You wake up at, the crack of dawn. You get bussed out, or you take the ferry out, and then you get bussed to Fort Wadsworth. And again, same thing. You sit there for a long time and you just wait, and you can use up a lot of energy being anxious about that, or you can just relax. So, of course, I am recommending that you just relax. So, after the race, have a plan of action to meet up with your family and friends. I know this sounds silly to a lot of you that have done this race before, and it's like, well, of course, why wouldn't you? But just again, if you've never done a big race before, if you've never done Boston before, know that it is it's a cluster. A big race is always a cluster afterwards. Be prepared to have a very long walk to wherever you are trying to go. Even if you're in one of the big downtown hotels, you are going to have an extremely long walk through the finish line area to get to your family. So if your family is expecting you to finish, 3.5 hours after you start, just give them the heads up. You may not see me for 4.5 hours. It's going to take a while to be reunited, so they don't get worried. If you're like me, you do not run with a phone, so you can't call people and start trying to, coordinate. Also have a place that you're going to meet. Obviously the race takes care of that. They have a family reunion area. They have these huge letters where you can, say, hey, family, meet me, or meet me at that big F. So again, just have a plan. Let them know that it's going to take a while for you to get through the finish line. And furthermore, soak it all up, you know, get your medal, like get all the pictures you can. When they ask if you want your picture taken, regardless of what kind of race you just had, you get your picture taken because you just finished the Boston Marathon. And that's pretty darn awesome. Just a little bit about the mental side of it, and this is not necessarily specific to Boston, but basically you have 100% control over a few things on race day, and those should be your number one priority. Focus on those goals. What do you have 100% control over? Certainly your attitude. You know, oh, it's pouring down rain and there's gale force winds. Okay, I could be grumpy about this, or I could accept the fact that it's going to be a slow, hard day, and I'm just going to enjoy it. And I'm going to live to tell about the year that I ran the Boston Marathon when it was 32 degrees, pouring down rain, and gale force winds. So you have control of your attitude, so therefore control it to your benefit. You also have 100% control over your fueling plan, how you do your nutrition, so therefore do it appropriately. You also have control over some targets like pace and heart rate to an extent. So you can also execute those and control those as best you can. Things not to even think a ton about, things you can't control at all, the crowd, the wait time, the weather, things like that. Yes, you should take those into consideration, but don't get anxious or worried or, you know, worked up about them, because again, those are things you can't control, and instead focus on the things you can. And above all, stick to the plan. It's so super easy to get caught up in the hype in Boston. And we all say, oh no, it's not going to be me. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go out at, you know, 5:50 pace on that first downhill mile. And before you know it, you're looking at your Garmin and it says 5:50 pace on the first downhill mile. So just stick to the plan. And that's about it. Now I just have some fun facts, because if you come to Boston, you need to be educated about the Boston Marathon itself. As you probably all know, the symbol right here, you're going to get a shirt with it. I recommend buying the coat. I don't know what coat colors there are this year. Every year they change the coat colors, but get the coat with the unicorn on it. Why a unicorn? So here's a little education about the unicorn. It is actually probably, they thought, okay, you may think that it's from mythology. Chinese and other mythologies regard the unicorn as an ideal and something to be pursued, but which can never be caught. But it's actually more likely that the unicorn was borrowed from the coat of arms from one of the BAA. The BAA is the Boston Athletic Association. They put the race on one of their first families. So it's just a coat of arms, really, but now it's the symbol for the Boston Marathon. Still, it's very iconic. You'll see it everywhere, at the start line, at the finish line. Something that you strive for, but maybe can never achieve is full perfection. So that's the story on the unicorn. Also, another fun fact, you will see, you've probably all heard, if you haven't, it's a famous saying here in Boston, right on Hereford, left on Boylston. It's on a million different t-shirts. So that's another thing you can spend your money on at the expo. I have one myself. It's one of my favorite shirts. Right on Hereford these are the last two turns in the race you will take. You will take a right on Hereford, and then you will take a left on Boylston. The finish line is on Boylston. It is an awe-inspiring finish line. You will not be able to hear yourself even think. It's a crazy, awesome finish line. But Boylston is very long. So when you make that left on Boylston, you think you're done, but you have a little ways to go. Just know you have several blocks to go until you see that sweet, sweet finish line. So buy yourself a right on Hereford, left on Boylston t-shirt or bumper sticker or mug, whatever. So, and that is it. That is my story on the Boston Marathon. We have a Boston Marathon camp coming up. It is not this weekend, but it is the following weekend. So it'd be March 22nd through 24th. We run the whole course. It's run out of Normatec. So if you are interested in coming, we still have some slots available, and you'll get to see what I was talking about with the course before you get to actually run it. And now I will take any questions. If you have questions, just type it in the chat box or in the question box. I'll wait a few minutes for questions, and otherwise you can email me. I'm just Beth. I don't actually have my email on there. That's kind of a problem. I'm just Beth at therunformula.com if you have any questions that you want to ask later. So. And of course, if you are running the race, have an amazing race. It's pretty darn fun time. And I wasn't always from Boston. I grew up in Pittsburgh, but now that I'm here, it kind of feels like a hometown race. So it's pretty exciting for us. Any questions? Anything? Anything? Phil says, how do we access the run calculator? The run calculator, just go to therunformula.com. You do not have to be have member access to get to it. You can use it. Anybody can use it. So it's just therunformula.com, and then you'll see if we actually, you just go to therunformula.com. You can see here where it says calculators. Up here, Phil, and then just click on running calculator. Maybe, and there it is. So you can play around with that. Any other questions? No. Sure thing, Phil. I'm calling you Phil. You might want to be called Philip. Sorry about that. All right, guys. I think that's it. Doesn't look like anybody else has questions. If you think of something later on, again, just email me at beth@therunformula.com. And best of luck to you all. We will talk to you soon.